the middle of the week. We're grinding our way through to another weekend. Another weekend of college basketball, golf, NASCAR. Spring training's underway. Olympics are wrapped up. Trying to make it through the weather. Seems like snowing every other day in places that don't get a lot of snow, or at least haven't had a lot of snow in a long time. I think about that monster snow that hit the Northeast last weekend. Just whoo. And I have a friend. Who she lives in Queens, works in Manhattan, and she's been so excited. She was going to Aruba for a few days with her son. I think her mother might have been tagging along as well. She was so excited. And I reached out. I'm like, hey, you got back just in time for this monster snowstorm. And then she responded a couple hours later, like, no, I'm still in Aruba. We're still here. We're stuck. And it's not great. We can't even get a flight for like 4 more days, which you would think, oh, well, there's worse places to be stuck, but you got to get back for work. You got to get back for school. It costs money. They're not going to let you stay in these resorts for free. I'm sure there's probably a charge, an upcharge, some kind of different price in general for another flight. You know how that works. The airlines are never easy to deal with. Little cooperation, if any, even during natural storms. So I'm worried about her. I hope she gets back in time. We've known each other for decades. A very good friend. Man. I mean, yeah, it sounds great being stuck in Aruba, but at the same time, I mean, will this cost her another vacation? She's not super rich. Will the expenses of this trip keep her from going somewhere this summer? Instead of going to the Bahamas, maybe she goes to Myrtle Beach or something. I'm not putting down Myrtle Beach, but there's a difference in price and, well, we'll say quality too. Quality too. Speaking of quality of college basketball continues to be off the charts, really everywhere. I mean, nationally, the game has been excellent. And the only thing that could mask the level of competition that we've seen this year, specifically from the freshmen. This has got to be the greatest freshman class in the history of college basketball. I'm not being over the top. That's not hyperbole. I really think it's possible. I have no way to maybe quantify that. Perhaps I could reach out to somebody who's done that exercise. But you look at these teams that are being driven by these freshmen. If we were to have had a better freshman year over the last, let's arbitrarily say 30 years, I would have to think it would have come since 2005, 2006, when the one and done rule became a thing, and the best of the best in high school had to go to college for at least 1 year. I would have thought it would have manifested at some point during that span, but it's happening now. And it's not like, as I said, it's not like those guys are going from high school to the NBA, that college isn't getting the best of the best. They have. But this is phenomenal what's happening. It has nothing to do with NIL. Has nothing to do with transfer portal. These are high school guys coming in and playing lights out as freshmen. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. We'll discuss it more in a moment, but let's go ahead, get to some headlines. Got a few topics to get to. Charles Bediako took another loss in court. The former Alabama player, former G League player, now former Alabama player again. He was seeking an injunction to go ahead and keep playing while under appeal. And I don't understand all the machinations of legal rigmarole and wrangling and procedure and this or that. But it would have seemed to me that when he was shot down a week or so ago, that would have been the end of it, because he sued the NCAA, and then they had a hearing, and the hearing, he got a temporary restraining order allowing him to play. He played in 5 games for the Crimson Tide. Then he had the hearing to get the injunction, and it was denied. So now he wants another one while under appeal for the. It's just a lot, and I think at this point he needs to cut bait. The Crimson Tide needs to cut bait and just move forward. He hasn't played for Alabama since February 7th. He had 12 points, 3 rebounds against Auburn, and as I mentioned, 3-2. I still think he's an asset. I still think he's somebody that you want on your team if you can have him, 7-foot rim protector who's versatile. But man, we've discussed it here. The PR hit alone that Alabama is taking, and Nate Oates is standing by that this was his opportunity to help one of his guys to get back in school and this, that, and the other. Could have taken online courses. If they really loved him that much, they would have comped him, you would think, to continue his education when he left Alabama early a few years ago to enter the NBA draft, go undrafted rather, go into the G League, make nickels to play minor league basketball while he's chasing this NBA dream. You would have thought they would have encouraged him then to continue with their education. I like Nate Oates. I love Nate Oates coach teams. The hypocrisy of this, though, is just yucky. Do not care for it one little bit. And a question I have is, how does the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee weigh the 5 games that Charles Bediako played? Not just those 5 games for Alabama, but for the opponents. Specifically, the 3 games that Alabama won. Will the selection committee view those through different lenses with regards to how they look to the opponents? That's a question we're going to ask Mr. Bracketology himself. We got Joe Lunardi of ESPN joining us in a few minutes. I'm going to ask him that. How will they look at Alabama? How does he look at Alabama when he's putting together his brackets and the impact one way or another of a Charles Bediako? That's something we'll ask Joe Lunardi in just a moment. A couple of other tidbits to get to first, though. Kentucky coach Mark Pope, who one of the most buttoned-down guys ever when he's speaking, just absolutely fantastic. He gave some really good advice to a young journalist last week. They said, what would you tell somebody who's up and coming in journalism business? And he just gave this thoughtful 2-minute answer about, do you want to be someone that's chasing clicks, or do you want to be the best hardcore journalist that you can be? And it was really cool. He gave a thoughtful answer. He took the time to connect with this individual. And I was really impressed. And that's why and I'm not alone, am shocked by what happened after Kentucky lost to Auburn. There was the questionable foul call, gave Auburn an opportunity to win the game, and indeed they did win the game with less than 2 seconds remaining. And Mark Pope, he goes to his post-game presser. He says all the right things again, but as he's leaving, he's caught on a hot mic talking to his athletic director, Kentucky athletic director Mitch Barnhart, saying something of the effect of, don't let those MFers find me. MFers, I think that he might have used the whole thing. I didn't say they cheated us. And you could read between the lines. Well, he got fined anyhow for that. And I don't know if it was intentional. I don't know if maybe he thought, yeah, this will be my way to communicate without doing it directly. He knew there would be a hot mic. He had to get it out of his system. Either way, he's $25,000 poor. Given his multi-million-dollar salary, not a whole lot, not a big deal, but plenty of things to extrapolate from that and opportunities for an armchair psychologist to dig in and try to see what's going on in the mind of Kentucky coach Mark Pope. Massive weekend coming up, as always, for college basketball, but specifically for the ACC. A lot on the line. You've got Virginia at Duke. It's going to be at Cameron Indoor Stadium, and I'm jacked for this game. I am so jacked up for this game. Duke right now, the number 1 overall seed, basically by every projection, they're number 1 overall seed in the AP poll, or number 1 ranking. I had them number 1 overall in the AP poll, my most recent ballot. But they're also number 1 in bracketology. Joe Lunardi has them number 1 as well. Every other projection, they're number 1. It's going to be a noon tip-off, by the way. Virginia and Duke. It's on ESPN, noon Eastern time. Virginia, also in the midst of a really good year. Virginia's having a fantastic season. I'm looking at it right now. They're ranked 11th, 13-2 in the ACC, 25-3 overall. Just curb stomped the other night. NC State. Woo! Big win against the Woofers. And this is going on. Virginia is beating NC State 90-61 Tuesday night, while Duke is dropping the hammer on Notre Dame 100-56. They're going to play this weekend, and what's at stake? Well, I'll tell you what's at stake. The number 1 overall seed in the ACC tournament. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal, a ginormous deal to get that. It's actually something that Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski, only accomplished once during his final 12 seasons at Duke. For John Shire to do it now this early in his tenure, that's a pretty good accomplishment. And what does it say for Ryan Odom, the coach of Virginia, if he were to pull this off? He just took over for Tony Bennett. Just fantastic. I'm really looking forward to this game. And here's another one I'm looking forward to, a little closer to home here in the Carolinas, Louisville at Clemson. This is also a significant game, because Clemson has got to figure out a way to get off this 4-game losing streak that has seen it going from playing Duke for first place in the ACC just a couple of Saturdays ago to now just trying to salvage a higher seed in the NCAA tournament and try to get at least inside that top 4 for the ACC tournament. And that's still in play. Still in play for Louisville also, by the way, which lost to UNC. Sans Caleb Wilson. Henry Vasar was back, however, for the Tar Heels. Louisville sitting at 20-8, 9-6 in the ACC. So they're 5 games back at Duke. Clemson's 4 games back at Duke. A lot on the line. I'm looking forward to that. Pat Kelsey and his guys are going to be up for it. Pat always has his guys ready. I've known Pat for a long time. I've known Pat since he was director of ops for the late, great, I can't say great emphatically enough, great Skip Prosser at Wake Forest. He gets his guys ready. His guys are always energetic. No coach is better at energizing a fan base either than Pat Kelsey. What he did at Winthrop was great. What he did at Charleston was phenomenal. And he's come and he's jolted Louisville. And Louisville under Kenny Payne, love his heart, great guy, not a great coach. Louisville had gone from angry, not being elite under Kenny Payne, to apathetic. And the only thing worse than being angry is being apathetic. At least anger elicits an emotion. Apathy, people are like, If they're angry, they'll still talk about you. If they're angry, they're more likely to put money in to try to reverse things. If they're apathetic, they just don't care. And that's the worst. Pat has flipped that script in 2 seasons at Louisville. And by the way, I mentioned Skip Prosser. He jolted things at Wake Forest after Dave Odom, who did a solid job at Wake Forest, but at the end of his tenure, had become pretty apathetic. Skip came in, wonderful job. Chris Mack, the current coach at Charleston, who was the former coach at Louisville and former coach at Xavier, he was on that staff with Pat. Just a really, Chris Paul playing point guard, that helped. We lost Skip way too soon. I never can say enough good things about Skip Prosser. He was always just so kind to me, just over the top kind. Hammer? Well, Hammer. Talk to you like that. Just the first time I met Skip Prosser, I was covering the ACC, and I had arranged, I think it might have been in June. He had just gotten the job a few months prior to that. And I arranged to go do a one-on-one with him. And I go to his office, and we sit, and we talk, and we chat. And then he insists on taking me around his office, the basketball office, and introducing me to every single person in the office. And when I say every single person in that office, I mean every single person in that office. We're talking assistant coaches. We're talking support staff. We're talking administrative assistants. Met the trainers. Met the weight strength coach. It was unbelievable. That was Skip. He connected with everybody. And it's been almost 20 years since we lost him, and I think about him a lot. And I think about the impact that he had on his players. I think about the impact he had on his coaching staff. But I also think about the impact he had on guys like me. It was just, you talk about a human being. Dan Collins, longtime Wake Forest beat writer at the Winston-Salem Journal, my former colleague, who's now basically retired and running open mic nights and writing original songs and just living the country Dan life. He has so many Skip stories. Called him Disco. He called Country Dan Collins Disco. And I just always thought that was the coolest, man. God rest Skip's soul. He'd be proud of his guys now, Chris Mack, the job Chris is doing at Charleston, and he'd be proud of Pat. Because Pat played for him at Xavier also. So let's think about Skip Prosser. today as we celebrate a day of fantastic college basketball. And let's think about Joe Lunardi. He's joining us on the other side. I'm going to ask him what he's thinking about the current state of college basketball. What does he think about the NCAA tournament? And here's a big question I have for him. What can the powers that be at the college football playoff learn from the way they put together the NCAA men's and women's basketball championships, specifically how they assemble their tournament fields? What could the CFP gather from that and maybe have a better product? That's what we're going to ask Joe Lunardi. He's joining us on the other side. Stick around.
Sports fans, it's time to gear up. Head to fanstreamsports.com and check out our brand new merchandise store. We're talking bold t-shirts, 3/4 zips, hoodies, hats, mugs, and more. Everything you need to rep your favorite shows and your favorite crew. Whether you're rolling with the JP Peterson Show in Tampa Bay, From the Rough in Dallas, the Tim May Show featuring Clay Hall, or the Jeff Thidoff Show in Ohio, or any of our FanStream Sports original programming, we've got the perfect look for game day and every day. So don't wait. fanstreamsports.com. Click merch and grab your gear now. Wear the stream, live the stream. fanstreamsports.com.
Regular season wrapping up, conference tournaments right around the corner, and then the big event, the NCAA tournaments, soon after that. We talk about the NCAA tournaments. We talk about the field. We talk about the brackets. We talk about trying to figure out who will win college basketball's ultimate prize. And one guy stands out above the rest when it comes to this. He's actually made a cottage industry out of trying to figure out who's going to play for the championship. It's our friend Joe Lunardi. And Joe, I appreciate you coming on. And my first question for you is, are you Punxsutawney Phil of basketball? Because you kind of vanish come April, and then your head starts popping up again around January.
Well, I'm either Punxsutawney Phil or Dr. Phil, depending on who is on the phone. When it's coaches who are upset about their seed or position, and they can't talk to any committee members, and somehow my phone rings, and I don't want to mention any schools in particular, but there's 2 or 3 every year. It gets a little bit Dr. Phil like, talking these guys off the ledge. But yeah, I think Punxsutawney Phil is really the perfect analogy, because that week that the groundhog sees its shadow is always 6 weeks until Selection Sunday. So I say, I see my shadow, 6 more weeks of bracketology, and then you can get rid of me for another year.
Yeah, I find it shocking, but I don't find it shocking that coaches would contact you arguing about something that really could sway the committee, could not sway the committee. They need to worry about the game on hand, and they're always talking about how polls don't matter and this and that. I think that speaks volumes to what you created. I mean, you really started something here, and people latched hold of it 20, 25 years ago. Can you kind of just 30, Joe? Yeah. Can you kind of sum up your journey and how you got to this place?
Yeah, the short version is Philly guy, went to St. Joe's at the height of the Philadelphia Big Five, when all the games, all 5 schools, St. Joe, Temple, Villanova, LaSalle, Penn, were playing at the Palestra. Still my favorite venue for our sport. And little did I know that I was majoring in college basketball, right? I thought I was a political science major. Well, let's be thankful that didn't happen. I look back and I think of all the people who served as mentors for me, coaches, media, administrators, ADs, whatnot. And it looks like a logical path when you look backward, but who knew really then what would happen? I mean, Al Gore hadn't even invented the internet yet. So there was no way to know that this path was going to be what it is, and that, frankly, the audience for this would be what it is. And, whenever I get a little salty, and, lack of sleep will do that to people, and it's a lot of lack of sleep for the next few weeks. I realize that it's that fandom, that fanaticism, if you will, fan being short for fanatic, is what fuels this whole thing. Like, college basketball fans are a bit of a unique breed in that, we all have our school right? Because unlike pro sports where there's only 30 some towns that have it at the highest level, well, we all went to school somewhere, right? We all have our squad, or if we don't, it was mom or dad or crazy Uncle Steve or the guy at the water cooler at work. And it's a bragging rights thing. And I've always loved it. I'm always going to love it. And I'm just very fortunate to be in this position.
You start putting together your predictions and you start making your brackets and how the field's going to line up. And it's a lot like, I imagine, the selection committee, what they do, and they're sequestered and they're figuring it out. How has the process changed for you over the years? And when I ask you that, I'm kind of asking you to speak for the selection committee as well, because I'm assuming you use the same methodology, the same metrics, so on and so forth. How's it different now than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
Well, my process by definition is a little more accelerated, only because, I don't have 5 days to come up with one bracket like they do. I have to be updating in real time, watching Louisville, Carolina on Monday night, watching Kansas, Houston on Monday night. There are graphics producers in the truck that want to know what to put up on the screen if the game goes this way or that way, right? Scott Van Pelt, SVP, who's as huge a college hoop head as there is, we're coming on right after Big Monday, Big 12. Like, give me the Big 12 seeds, either or. So I plug in some numbers and I come up with scenarios, and that kind of thing isn't something that the committee does. They get to deal simply with final results, not hypotheticals, and that's probably the biggest way it has changed. When I started, one snapshot bracket a week was, state of the art, if you will. And, now I'm sitting there doing scenarios like a busy Saturday, like we had this past weekend, literally from 11 o'clock in the morning till we go off the air with the last game at 2 a.m. We're just moving things around, ranking and re-ranking, and I've built a system where I can plug in numbers to try and determine how much movement a given game will do to a team's net ranking or its schedule strength or any of the other metrics that the committee uses. My job is a little, well, actually, it's a lot different until the last bracket, and then I do try to follow every procedure that they use to build the bracket. And all I'll say is mine's a lot quicker because I don't have to get 11 other people to agree with me. And, without that, and we were just out there last week in the NCAA headquarters for the mock exercise, which hasn't been done in a while. And it was a good refresher. I marvel at the technology in terms of when they do bracket building and the data that they can snap their fingers and access. But I kind of have all that on one or two screens. And by definition, I have to take some shortcuts. But the end result is still pretty close.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but have you ever sat into the college football playoff selection committee, or have you ever talked to anybody that's been on that committee and maybe shared best practices on, hey, if they did this might help? Or I would just be curious to get your thoughts on that entire process.
All I really consume is the rhetoric. Like, I hear the comments and I hear the complaints, and I do hear, what the chair or the quote unquote insiders say in interviews. And this may come across like a, I don't know-it-all kind of statement, and I don't mean it to be. Their process is way primitive compared to basketball. Some of the comments sound like where we were 15, 20, 25 years ago. And I think part of that is because they're still relatively new at it, and also because they've only been picking 4, 8 Type 12 teams. They don't have to make the kind of fine distinctions that happen down at the bubble, right? And yet they look like pretty smart people, and they certainly put the time in. But there are things that they could learn, and I think it mostly has to do with like some of the things that they talk about, like game control and barometric pressure of this conference versus that conference. Like, who'd you play, who'd you beat, and where was the game? Like, start there and move forward.
Will you be angry if I throw it out there that you need to be the conduit between the two? I don't want to put work on you, Joe, but we need somebody to maybe help them out a little bit.
The transfer portal and ranking and re-ranking rosters all April and May and June has already cost me 2 strokes off my handicap, which was bad to begin with. So, I do not. If my wife were here, she'd say you do not need another part-time job.
Joe, just a couple more minutes.
I think it's called the lawn.
I'd be remiss if I didn't actually ask you a couple of basketball-related questions, and my first one is this: Alabama, the Charles Bediako situation. He played in 5 games; they went 3-2. Do you weigh that into your formula as he didn't play? You punish them. How should the committee look at that if you're in charge of things? If you're Grand Poobah?
I would weigh it. Or weigh it more if I thought it mattered to the committee. Okay, because at the end of the day, my job isn't to tell the public what I would do. It's to tell the public what we think the committee is going to do, right? Everybody else on television is saying what they would do. And I don't have that luxury because the score that's kept for me is really 12 people, and I got to get inside their head. That being said, at Alabama, like, we're not talking about peak Shaquille O'Neal here. Okay. Bediako was a piece of Alabama in 5 games. They went 3-2, and they were favored in 3 and not favored in 2. They pretty much played to their pre-existing level with him, and they've played to that level and maybe even a little better without him. So I just think it's a non-story from a seeding perspective. I think you could argue that the teams that they beat can be a little salty. But even then, the committee will take it as player availability, whether it's injury, whether it's academics, whether it's, I got a parking ticket and I couldn't play, whatever it is. It's kind of rub of the green, if you will. So his particular case, and I get why it got all the attention, is a non-issue. And I couldn't help but chuckle when I saw yesterday that Nate Oates was named as one of the assistants for Team USA under 18 this summer. And I thought, well, I guess he's not going to have Bediako go to court for that one.
Well, he's Canadian. Bediako.
Oh, you're right. Oh, well, in that case, I'm just being a smack.
A smack. Joe, my last question, well, it's a 2-part question, Joe, then I'm going to let you go. I know you got to go shovel snow or something.
Yeah.
What game or games have the potential to be the most impactful this weekend that you're watching a little more closely than usual? And the second part of the question, how dire are things for the Clemson Tigers? How far have they plummeted since coming back from California? They've been on a 4-game losing streak.
Yeah, let's go backwards. Not dire. Okay, for Clemson, they've slipped down to the 8-9 range, which is not where they want to be, obviously. But it's still a long way from there to out. And you would think that they'd at least go 500 here down the stretch and do no worse than stay where they are. I would be extremely surprised if they missed the NCAA tournament. Games of impact, every night it seems at this point. But like, I'll give you one. UCLA hosts USC at 11 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday night, right? Most people on our side of the country are not going to be up and awake. Well, I've got USC as like first team out and UCLA last 4 buys. So, like, in a way, that game's 10 times bigger than what we just saw Duke, Michigan, right? The night after that, Santa Clara goes to St. Mary's. You know, can the WCC still have a third team? Yes, but Santa Clara really needs to sweep St. Mary's to put that one to bed. And those are the kinds of games that I pay more attention to than, let's say, Kansas Houston on Big Monday. I got to watch it start to finish only because there were no other games taking place. And because the Olympics is over and I have control of the remote again. But you know, no, but people know what I'm saying. And
Yeah,
I'm just saying what people are thinking. And that always gets me in trouble. But yeah, these games, that game at 2:30 on the Thursday of championship week at the, I don't know, ACC tournament between Team 7 and Team 10. Like, those games often mean more than Duke Carolina in the championship game.
I don't know how you do it, Joe. The sheer volume of what you have to pay attention to is absolutely mind blowing. Listen, I'm so thankful for your time. I know this is the busiest of busy seasons for you, and I really, you're the man, Joe. That's all I'm going to say, bro.
I'm happy to do it. Thanks for having me, and I need that wide shot with your golf clubs because that's the closest
Like that, huh?
I'm getting to golf clubs anytime soon.
You're coming to the Carolinas, Joe. We're going to bring you down. I appreciate you, man.
Deal. Thanks.
All righty, it's Joe Lunardi of ESPN. You talk about a guy who created something and really just ran with it. The whole bracketology thing, his brainchild. And get into the story. Do yourself a favor. Research how this thing developed. It started kind of in his basement, and he was putting together his own little newsletter and all that. Then it grew and it grew and it grew. And I actually got text from a couple of people. One of them, my attorney, who was just gushing when he found out I was going to speak with Joe, and just said, "Oh, please thank him and tell him I missed getting it FedExed in the mail and all that." And you still get it. It's behind the paywall on ESPN and ESPN.com, and I highly recommend that you invest in it. It's worth your money. But what he created just exploded. It's almost like the people who invented fantasy football or fantasy baseball. It became something ingrained in our culture. Bracketology. I can go to 99 out of 100 people on the street. They're going to know what I mean when I say bracketology. Okay, I'll be more conservative. How about 90 people out of 100? You get what I'm saying? And he did that. And he ran with it and he owned it, and it's worked out fabulously for him. The only problem is that he stays super busy, especially this time of year. And when I use the Punxsutawney Phil analogy, I think that's spot on. We don't see Joe Lunardi. We don't hear from Joe Lunardi from April until November, but then he's kind of omnipresent the rest of the year. There's Joe Lunardi. There's Joe Lunardi. But he vanishes. He vanishes. And think about how much basketball this man has to consume. I watch a lot of basketball. I watch a lot of football. I have to, being one of 60, 62 voters for the AP football, AP basketball polls. I take it very seriously. I want to see as much as I can so I can make sound decisions and come to prudent conclusions. Joe has to dive deeper, and it's hard for basketball, man. I only have to figure out the 25 best teams in the country, according to me. He has to be able to adequately gauge all 300 and some teams and figure out if they're worthy of being in the NCAA tournaments. I don't know how he does it. It blows my mind. And then there are other things to consider than just what happens on the court, What is this metric? What is that metric? There's so much else to think about. I'll use the Charles Bediako situation as a prime example. How did his presence impact this team? Not just Alabama, but this team they beat, or even this team they lost to. How does it impact them? Joe Lunardi gets it done. And there's hundreds of imitators out there who are trying to do that. They're trying to put together their own brackets. They're trying to predict. They're trying to forecast. They're trying to, especially in this day and age where gambling is legal across most of the world. They want to put that product out there so that people can start wagering on it, because there's a lot of money to be made one way or the other. Joe Lunardi, he basically started all that. I mean, people were trying to predict the NCAA tournaments before, but not the way he has. He's like Phil Steele. I think about Phil Steele. He's kind of Joe Lunardi's counterpart in the world of college football, with the amount of time and research and devotion that they put into these products. They love doing it. I don't know that I would love anything the way Joe Lunardi and Phil Steele love their respected sports. I don't. I wish I did have that kind of passion. And it's not like they're kids. They've been doing it for decades. And yet here they go. And I know they make buku dollars doing it now. They've created pretty good lives for themselves thanks to these things. Joe Lunardi with his bracketology and Phil Steele with his football annuals and his reports. But you've got to love that, and they love it. And it's worked out fabulously for them. That's it for this episode. I want to thank you for stopping by. Remember, this podcast, like every other podcast, do what you do, like, subscribe, whatever. Please do it for this one. Pass it on to your friends. Leave a comment below or hit me up directly on Twitter/X at Scott H Sports. The DMs are open. Questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, you name it, throw it at me. If you've got a topic you would like to see me broach, you'd like to see me discuss, bring it on. I'll do my best. If there's a guest you would like me to interview, just name him or her. I'll be happy to try to facilitate that and get them on in a future episode. Otherwise, thanks for stopping by. Until next time.